There's two kinds of dating. Did you know that?
I think I've tried both.
Have you?
The good and the bad.
And I asked,
and the ugly. There's three
I asked our
kinds.
daughter, Gracie, what kind of dating are they? She said there's two kinds. There's for fun and for marriage.
Oh.
And I put it like this: for
It
fun.
can't be both.
Well, it can. It should be. If
I
you're
should-
dating
I
for
mean,
marriage
hopefully.
and it's not fun,
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Right.
But anyway, dating for fun or dating for the future
Yes.
or for a future relationship, dating for a purpose, not
Right.
just dating to have fun. Now, when you're in high school, dating for fun is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
And even college, dating for fun. But as you start becoming an adult, if you're 25, 30 years old, dating is not just for fun, it's for the purpose
Well,
of marriage, finding a life partner.
Ideally, yes.
Now, a lot of people would disagree
There are
with me on
some folks, though, we're in an interesting culture where, of course, being single, remaining single is way more extended than when I was, in
Yeah.
my 20s and married the first time. And now there's a lot of people who are single again. And dating is hard, you guys. We've done it.
And
You and
so
I have done it.
we've done it. We've dated each other.
Yes.
We still date
and
each other.
others.
And we've dated others.
The
And-
nameless faces.
And I can tell you, some of the dating was not so much fun.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
It's
that could be-
hard. So I feel we have obviously raised a bunch of kids, and some of them still remain single in their 20s up to their almost 30s.
Right.
And we have, and so they're negotiating the dating world, which has really been weird this last year because of COVID. It's weird anyway. But when I was single and met you, that was kind of when the whole like eHarmony thing happened.
What?
I dabbled.
We weren't on eHarmony.
I dabbled a little bit in eHarmony. I met some eHarmony boys and gentlemen, I should say. And you
Is
had
that
a
the
lot
one
of.
where you swipe left or swipe right?
No, babe, that's Tinder, and that's today.
All right. Okay.
So yeah,
That's for real.
That's really that's a different level. But
I'm going to
and
swipe right on you.
You were a hey
think.
gal, you want to go on a coffee date kind of guy?
I totally am. Let's try the coffee. And if that works, we can ramp up from there.
Right.
By the way, we are Tim
Smart.
and Kimberly.
Yes.
Scott, you're listening to Hope Rescue Podcast.
You're dating professionals.
And pretty much professionals.
We're pretty much
We've
professionals.
dated a lot of people.
we know
over the
who
years.
not to date.
So here's the thing that I want you to know. Today, we're going to start a little mini series, probably 2 weeks, on how to understand the negotiables
Right.
and the non-negotiables
Yes.
in dating.
And
And we'll get into that, but let's go back to our dating. How did that go?
well, let me just
Was
say
it wonderful?
this. Let me just say this
Just say
before
it
we
was
get into our
wonderful, we'll
dating.
move on.
This next two shows, we want to give a shout out to our sweet friend Hannah, who is single and in her 20s. And she
A
wrote
listener to
us
the
at
podcast.
Hope Rescue Podcast saying, help a sister out because there's a lot of questions around dating and in regards to finding someone with the same values and, what about their belief system and stuff. And we thought, that's a great idea, Hannah. We're going to do a couple shows on dating because we've watched our kids go through it. We went through it. So hopefully this is beneficial to you and many others.
Yeah.
But yes, back to our dating. So
Yes,
should I give them the skinny?
The miracle.
Should I give them the skinny on how we got together, Tim?
Yeah, I think we have before, but tell them again because they love to hear it.
Yeah. So
Probably.
here I was, a single mom with 5 children.
Which would have been nice to know before we got married. That's my go-to joke.
And like I said, had been swimming in the waters of eHarmony, not
The abyss.
successfully. Maybe
the
drowning.
abyss called eHarmony.
Maybe drowning. I was afloat a few times, but knew I had not met my husband. Met some good guys. I'm actually a fan of eHarmony. I feel like the vetting process is quite extensive and it's expensive, so people don't do it if
Is
they
it
just want to
expensive?
hook up.
I thought it was inexpensive.
No, it's a little pricey when you're a single mom with 5 kids, Tim.
I don't know anything about that. I've never been a single mom with 5 kids.
So-
nor have I ever been on a dating app.
No, I know. You've never needed to because we find you. We come to you, Tim.
That's
Because
right.
you're just that spicy hot. So, I'm a single mom. We had some friends in common. You had been a single pastor for 6 years. at your church, and I was a single mom on staff at my church, and we had some friends in common who kept trying to set us up on a blind date.
Yes.
I was down for that. I said, okay. I knew who he was. He was on a radio show. I'd listened to him. I thought he was hilarious and had a really fun, irreverent sense of humor, but with a strong commitment to the word, which actually comes through on this podcast often.
Sometimes.
Yes. And then I looked you up. I Googled the heck out of you. I'm
That's
so
a
glad
problem.
for Google. Yeah. And I thought, you look like a very handsome, big Italian guy. So,
that's
I
amazing.
heard
It's a miracle. I'm
heard
not
great
Italian.
things about you. Anyway, long story short, the friends came back to me and said, he's not having it. He doesn't like being set up on dates. He will not go on blind dates. And it's rough being a single pastor. and so I said, okay. And one gal, she said, I really want you to pray about this, but this is his personal email. And consider praying about it and reaching out to him and introducing yourself. And I just told her, I said, there's absolutely no way I'm going to do that. Because I had experienced some really painful rejection within my first marriage. Not in the dating world as much, which was nice.
Yeah.
But so anyway, the Lord kind of messed with me that night and brought to me back a passage from Scripture. I couldn't sleep, and at 1 a.m, I stopped wrestling with him, and I said, "Okay, Lord, I'm going to do it tomorrow." So I went into the office. I'm taking a long time, huh?
No,
Okay.
you're not.
I went
I'm
into the
enjoying
office the next morning.
Every minute of this, and so are our listeners.
I wrote an email saying, "This is who I am. This is what I do."
I can't wait to hear how it works out.
Sounds like we have some friends in common, and so I hope you have a great weekend. And then I freaked out and sent it. There's a little more to that story, but anyway, you responded back in a half hour.
Yeah, I did. Because, well, first of all, I was at a coffee shop, and I get this email, ping, you've got mail. That was a long time ago. You've got mail.
15 years ago.
What was that, Yahoo?
15 and a half.
What was the one that said,
honey,
you've got mail?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Anyway, so I get this email, and it's very sweet. I'm this creepy church lady.
Stalker.
Yeah. Actually, you said you weren't the creepy church lady.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, good. And then, so I wrote you back to get together for coffee.
You wrote me back in like a hot 30 minutes.
Yeah, I did. It took me that long to think about what I was going to say. I was trying to be really witty and funny.
You were, babe. I could
know,
feel
I
the
was.
chemistry coming off of
Yeah,
the
it was super funny.
computer.
I was amusing. I wanted to be adorable on email. You ever been adorable on email? Well, that's what I was. Anyway, so I sent the adorable email, and we started going back and forth on email. It was really delightful. We go back every year to that same coffee shop and revisit that. But anyway, and just like our marriage, they closed down that coffee shop, and they actually did. Anyway, they moved it, and we've moved too. We didn't close our marriage down. They moved the coffee shop on the other side of the parking lot, and the restaurant we went to after our coffee date is no longer there either. But anyway, I hope that has nothing to do with our future. So, and then we responded back and forth. We met for coffee, and that was it. I realized, because I didn't really want to date anymore because dating had been not good.
It'd been like a week since you had one. You were over it.
It was. I decided the day before I got that email, that's it for me. I'm off
No
of
more
dating.
coffee dates
Oh,
for
wait a
me.
minute. She's cute.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah. So it was at least 3 days. Anyway, so we get together for coffee, and I realize, oh my gosh, this is a woman that I could marry. By the time we finished our coffee date, which turned out to be about 4 hours, right?
It did.
And
Yeah.
I was like, if she will have me, I'll marry her now.
Aw, I felt the same way. I actually called my dad as soon as I got in my car, and I said, look, I need you to pray with me because I'm pretty sure I just met my husband.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, because we are church leaders and we've done a lot of marriage counseling and all that kind of stuff, this is not what we would advise to.
Are you going to tell them how fast things went?
To say, oh, this is my spouse and let's go get a ring in 18 days. Did we do that? Yes, we did. But we're not.
Do not do that.
Suggesting.
We are professional, spiritual professionals.
Yes.
Don't try it at home.
So here's the point of this. In our the next two episodes is that we have experience being in the trenches and how painful and difficult that can be in sorting through dating. We've both gone through failed marriages, so we understand how difficult this topic is of finding your person. But and we did experience an exceptional situation between the two of us when we met. However, we also had some stuff we had to work through even in that process to find out, are we compatible, even though we had so much in common, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a process as well. So we hope that we're just going to offer our stories, and we hope that this will give you a foundation, Hannah and friends,
Yes.
to be able to figure and sort some of this stuff out.
Yeah. So, what really reaches the level of non-negotiables? I will not marry an abusive man. That would be a
Yes.
non-negotiable.
Right.
Somebody who is very emotive, you might be able to handle, but you should not handle somebody who's toxic.
Right.
You understand? There are some things that reach a point where you say, that's a non-negotiable for me. So we're going to, in the next 2 weeks, this first one, we're going to talk about this concept of being unequally yoked and how that's used, and I might say misused.
Yeah,
And
explain that to somebody who doesn't even know what that means.
We're going to get into that in a minute. Why don't you read the scripture,
All right.
and then I'll get into the
All right, so here's the
concept
word
of yoking.
yoked in the Bible.
Yoking sounds very naughty.
It doesn't sound like it's not about muscles or being a gym rat.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Okay, it comes
By
out
the
of
way, we're back in the gym.
babe.
Come on, that's ADD.
That's a
that
different show.
ADD kicked in that fast.
The gym is in our garage now.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
wonderful.
you're doing great, honey.
I could tell you all about it, but let's
Okay.
get back to
Well,
yoked.
now back to scripture.
I'm yoked.
2 Corinthians 6:14 through 16 says this: "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share in it with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols?" So that's kind of where that whole thing, are you equally yoked, or are you unequally yoked, comes from.
So the yoking is an agricultural term. It was used, this is before we had tractors. Obviously, this is, back in the first century. And we didn't have tractors. So what they would do is you have beasts of burden, usually oxen, and the oxen were the kind of the beast of burden choice. And you would take two oxen, usually of similar strength, and you would yoke them together. That is many of you know what this is, but for those that don't, it's a wooden
Harness.
like a harness that goes over both beasts of burden, and it puts them at the same speed. It puts their necks together, and it goes under their neck, goes over their shoulder, and it keeps them in the same place. Then it's attached to whatever you're going to cultivate. It's a wagon, whatever it's going to be. And so they would yoke them together, and what that would do would be give greater strength. So if one beast of burden could only do so much work, but two together can make the work easier, and they could work for longer, and so forth. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 10, it says that you are not allowed, by the law, you are not allowed to put together an ox and a donkey.
That was a law?
That was under the law. It was under the Mosaic law. So there were other laws. In fact, in that same passage in Deuteronomy 22, you weren't allowed to mix fabrics, which I'm doing right now.
Yes, you are.
I am mixing
in all
fabrics.
the good ways.
In all the good ways. Anyway, you weren't you couldn't mix fabrics, and there's many reasons why. We're not under that law
Levitical
today.
law, yeah.
But I know this. We have two dogs, and one's Honey. It's a Maltipoo, which I swore I would never get a little, what I called have-it dog. And man, does she bark like I have it. Have it, have it, have it, have it. Somebody comes to the door, she goes nuts.
Yes.
Even if it's somebody she knows.
I know.
Our kids come to see us, and every week she barks at them.
She's the smallest member of our family, including grandson, who's she's
She
the
may be
tiniest
the
member.
most loved, too.
But the loudest.
I know she's loved more than I am in this household. But anyway,
Everybody's quiet.
everybody just, yes, okay, we're in agreement. Anyway, she's a delightful little dog. But then you got Biscuit, who's a medium-sized dog, and she's not as lovable. She's lovable, but she's a little bit of a pain because she's really mindful, or willful.
Stubborn.
She's stubborn. I just tried to get her to go into a bedroom during the recording, or else she'll bark at people going by. Yeah. She'll howl. Anyway, and I take them for a walk every day.
Right.
And when I take them for a walk, I look down and I have the leash for both of them. And Biscuit's just kind of normal walk, and Honey is running to keep up because they just don't have the same speed.
Right.
And she does. She'll run the whole, and I walk pretty fast. But it's funny because if you put two people together, you yoke them together in a binding relationship, and one is faster than the other, there's going to be a problem. That faster person is going to have to slow down. If you're more mature than your spouse, there's going to be you're going to have to accommodate that.
Yep, adjust.
And you got to know that people outgrow each other, but that doesn't mean the relationship is over. Should both continue to grow. The beauty is you can help each other grow. Anyway, so that's that idea. But he gives, and I'll do this real fast because Kimberly, in the preparation of this, Kimberly saw my notes and she said, okay, that's a little much. But this passage is really powerful. So let me just do this real quick. Yeah. There's 5 rhetorical questions, which means there is no answer to these. They're meant to be instructive, and they're about what it means to be unequally yoked. Kimberly just read them. First is about partnership. What partnership does righteousness have with lawlessness? And the word partnership literally means to eat out of the same bowl.
Oh, wow.
So when partners share whatever resources they have, what kind of, with righteous person and a lawless person, they should not eat out of the same bowl. They don't eat out of the same, their spiritual food is not the same.
Incompatibility.
Yeah. The second one is fellowship. You should not fellowship with light and darkness. Darkness doesn't fellowship with light. When light comes into a room, what happens to the darkness? It's annihilated. It's not driven out, it's destroyed, because darkness is the absence of light. So light dominates and destroys darkness. So there's no fellowship. They don't get along. Accord. It says, what accord does Christ and Belial, which is a name for Satan, what fellowship or what accord does Christ and Satan have? And the word accord means to sing in harmony. And they have different purpose. They have different goals. They have they are speaking into life in a different way. Satan is telling you things to destroy you. Christ is telling you things to build you up and to encourage your growth. And then he says, what portion does a believer have with the non-believer? And the word portion is this idea of sharing and giving. This, when you portion out something, you are portioning what you're going to give, what you're going to receive. Believers and non-believers can't share in the same way. They don't portion things the same way. You have the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, all of that. The final one, the 5th rhetorical question, is agreement. What agreement does the temple of God have with idols? And it literally means to put down together. They don't have the same standing. They don't sit together. The temple of God is for the worship of God. Idol worship, the idol's temple, is for false gods. So they don't fellowship together. So when he talks about being unequally yoked, he's talking not so much about relationships and friendships. He's talking about a binding connection with somebody. So you have relationships with friends that are not believers. And if you don't, then you're probably not doing God's will in reaching out to the world around you. You have neighbors that don't know Christ. Does this mean if you're unequally yoked? See, the yoking together means that you are bound together like 2 ox. You have to work together. There's no getting away. Synchronicity. You have to synchronize your efforts. Exactly. But this thing of relationships, I wanted to clarify this. This does not mean you should not have unbelieving friends. In fact, it says in 1 Corinthians 10:27, it said this: if one of the unbelievers invite you to dinner and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any questions on the ground of conscience. Now he's talking about eating food that would be, defile you and so forth. We won't get into all that. But what I wanted to point out is these Corinthian believers had been told in the first letter they received from Paul They were told that if a believer asks you to come to their house to eat and you want to go, go. So you should have non-Christian friends. And he's not saying unequally yoked being with unbelievers. He's not saying you shouldn't have.
I just want to back up because you
Yeah.
said if a believer asks you to come to their
It was-
house,
yeah.
it's an unbeliever.
I thought I read it right. Yeah, if the unbeliever asks you to go, right, that's right. So good you clarified that. His point is being unequally yoked is not about an association with non-believers, but about having a bound or binding relationships. Now, how does this relate to marriage or dating? Does this apply to dating? Yes, it does, but not exclusively to dating. What about business? When you go into business with somebody and that person has different set of values and you're yoked together with them and they are a partner that wants to do deceptive things and your Christian values say no, you're going to be in trouble at that point. False teachers. And this is really what he's talking about in this passage. Paul says, we want you to open your heart to us because we teach you the truth. But you have opened your heart, you Corinthian believers, have opened your heart to false teachers, and you need to not be yoked together with them. That's his real point, but there is the application to many different areas. So that's what it means to be, hopefully that's helpful in understanding what it means to be yoked together.
Good breakdown there.
Yeah. All right.
So one of the things that people ask in dating is, do I consider like, okay, do people change and should we trust someone who has a past? Well, we all have a past, right?
Yeah.
And things like, for instance, like cheating, maybe these are things to
Yeah,
consider.
what would
like
you do if somebody cheated
Right.
in their past relationships? Would you want to have a relationship with them?
So a criminal record possibly, or an addiction, something like that. And here's the thing. I love this word of wisdom my mom gave me when I started dating. I was 36 when I became single again. And I remember, my young version of Kimberly in my teens, I actually had created a list of the things that I prayed for and wanted in a husband. And then my first marriage ended up falling quite short. And I was, there was a lot of deception. There was a lot of betrayal and in the marriage, and I won't go into detail. But what it did do is it made me realize that I need to be wiser in the dating world. But also, at 36, here I am, a single mom, and I had a story myself. So my mom, I remember telling me when I was like dating, she's like, and I'm like, Mom, but there's this in his life, and da-da-da-da-da. And she said, honey, I just got to tell you, honestly, like, you have a story. You have a past now. You're 36 and you're a single mom with 5 kids, whether it was your fault or his fault or both of your fault. Like, this is your story. Somebody is going to have to reconcile that considers marrying you, that you have a story. Can they deal with it? And she said, everybody at this point has a story. You just have to realize, is it one that you can live with?
Okay, here's the thing about, like, say, a cheater. There's an old saying, cheaters always cheat, haters always hate. There's all those.
Yeah.
Cheaters don't always cheat.
I agree with that.
Cheaters can change, and haters can stop hating.
Yep.
And we've seen people that were racially they hated other peoples of different race who have become brothers in Christ and realized
Advocates.
That's advocates for racial harmony or racial interracial harmony. And the point being that don't exclude somebody because they're being honest with you about a previous cheating.
Right.
Although if they are a serial cheater,
Right.
they may not have changed.
Right.
And so you got to be careful about that. You talked about a criminal record. What was the crime? Had 4 DUIs and went to jail for that, or were they a serial killer?
Right.
I mean, you got to figure those things. Here's the big one you mentioned is addiction. When I think about addiction, there are people, we have people in our family. My daughter, Carrie, she tells her story very clearly. She's been clean and sober for a couple of decades now. And the reality is she changed.
Yeah.
And she was a really strong addict to drugs. And
So everybody has some kind of a story.
But they can change.
Right.
But you have to decide if you're willing to take that risk.
Right, exactly.
Because it is a risk. Another one, bankruptcy. The one good thing about bankruptcy, if somebody just declared bankruptcy, they get 7 years before they can do it again. So they got to keep their money together,
Yeah.
But how about somebody that's been married multiple times? I went
That's
out,
a red flag.
Yeah, I went out with this girl a few years ago before we got married. Obviously, more than a few years ago. Let me clarify. I'm getting in trouble here. I need a drink of water all of a sudden.
We've been married 15
Why is
years,
it getting
people.
hot in here?
So
Anyway,
if he was dating someone a few years ago, I'm in trouble.
A few years before I met you. And anyway, so I went out. It's such big trouble here. So I went out on a date with this gal, and she was telling me about her ex-husband. And I, as I'm listening to her talk about it, I'm thinking, wait a minute. How many times? So I asked her, how many times you been married? She'd been married 4 times. And I said, okay. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then all of the guys were the same problem with all those guys. And I got to thinking maybe the problem wasn't with those guys, but maybe the problem was with her. Now, that's not to say if you've been married multiple times, that you're a loser and, you shouldn't marry again, whatever.
No.
But there are people that are, in fact, they are serial married. I saw this one show, a 2020 show of a woman who had been married 6 times.
Yeah.
And
Here's your sign.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, I don't know if I want to take a chance on that.
And then you have to consider things like excessive debt, because if you're marrying someone and you don't realize that they're deeply, these are things that matter. And I will say this, do your homework and take your time. So for me, because I had in my first marriage experienced being defrauded really deeply and financially and all the things, I came out of that wiser. And so entering the dating world, I actually had a very close girlfriend of mine. She did background checks on anybody that I went on a physical date with, including you, because I knew that I couldn't risk my kids being exposed to someone at some point that I didn't know their full story. Because a lot of times in dating, in the first couple of dates, you hold that stuff, and you probably should. There's a lot of things that are private that you don't just throw out there to anybody. But we jumped into our relationship kind of quickly, so I knew I needed to get you checked
maybe
out.
I should have done an investigation on
me.
you.
You don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So there's another aspect to this. We'll kind of close with this thought: is how do you talk about sensitive issues in a relationship? Like, I think it's very important. We'll give just a few of those. One is you need to be straightforward and kind. You need to be assertive. You are looking at a life partner when you're dating for serious. And next week we're going to get into what are negotiables and non-negotiables, but you need to be straightforward in asking about sensitive areas. If you're considering someone for a life partner, you need to know these things.
Yeah.
So be straightforward.
And ask follow-up questions. That's really important. So if they lay down some facts, don't be afraid to
say, I was married and got a divorce. Okay, why?
You tell me more about that?
Yeah, why did you get a divorce?
That's fair. I think that's really fair. I think leading with integrity in those questions, it's important. And because we live in the day and age we do, where you can present something online and be something totally different. If you have values, you'll attract who you are. But you just got to lead with that. In other words, set the bar in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.